Great. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We're really happy to have you here. We are going to be talking a little bit more about what it looks like to be in a graduate psychology program. So our panel is going to focus on research, courses, funding, and what that looks like. My name is Kimberly Terry, and I am the graduate program administrator here for the Department of Psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. And I work with students and faculty. I do admissions all the way through graduation. So if you have contacted the graduate admissions office for more information, it's me that you've spoken with. So hello to those of you that I might have corresponded with prior to this event. We have a really great group of panelists. They are experts and they are really excited to share more information about our program with you. So without further ado, I will let them introduce themselves and get started. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, but if we aren't able to get to all of your questions, I will give Dr. Lee my contact information so that when she reaches out with the recording, it'll have our graduate admissions email. And so you can always email me if there was a question that you weren't able to ask or that you just thought of after the event. Great. So panelists, if you'll go ahead, Anna, would you like to start?
Hi, I'm Anna Madden-Rusnak. I'm a PhD student here at the University of Texas at Austin in the developmental psychology track program. Just really passionate about helping students, navigate this really tumultuous and stressful journey. And I'm just happy to be here and answer questions.
Frances.
Hi, I'm Frances Champagne. I'm a professor in the Department of Psychology. I'm also the graduate advisor and the associate chair for faculty and student affairs. And so a lot of what I do in terms of working with the graduate program is working with Kimberly and working with the administration of the department of the university to think about what we can do to enhance the experience of the students, to make sure everyone gets through the program. So I'm excited to answer your questions today.
And finally, we have Christine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Coughlin. I did my PhD work at UC Davis, and then I transferred over to Austin, and I'm doing a postdoc with Allison Preston. I do research in neuroscience and psychology, and I know what it's like to make that transition and to have all those decisions to make and not to have all the information. So I'm really happy to be here and to be able to answer any questions about my own experiences and the experiences of my peers and going through that exact same process.
Great. Okay, panel, if you could give us just a little bit of information on what courses are like in graduate school, maybe how they are different from the undergrad experience.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer this question because it was very shocking to me. I've always just gone straight through school. So I did my undergrad, went straight to a master's, and then came to my PhD. And the classes here at UT are kind of unlike any I experienced before. I remember panicking when a professor was like, "Oh, we don't have a syllabus. We're just here to talk about research." And I was like, "But wait, what do I need to do?" And one of the beautiful things about getting to this level of your education is it really is about like this bi-directional trust of like, we know you're here to learn and we know you're passionate. And so let's just spend time like talking about this research, honing your skills, like expanding your view of like what these questions mean. But it's definitely an adjustment to like checking things off a to-do list to just showing up and being part of the discussion. Not all classes are like that, but you'll find many classes in your PhD are a lot more free form from what you're used to in your undergrad.
I would definitely agree with that. It's a really fun kind of interactive learning environment. I had a lot of reading, so a lot of my classes had several research articles or chapters that were assigned delving into a particular area or topic. So I was in the developmental area, so I took a class on social development, and that entire semester we read really neat work on social development, really fundamental work, and then we would just discuss. And it was really nice to be able to have this interactive format. I was really nervous at first, but then it became really apparent that it was all about just having a productive discussion. Then there were statistics courses, and those were a little bit more structured. And usually those happened at the beginning of graduate school, which is great because you're going to use those skills throughout. And so I really encourage people to make the most of those skills and to really utilize those resources, because you can also make really great connections with professors and other people in the department, your peers, and it really can foster collaborations even outside of your lab and stuff like that. So the statistics courses, they were a little bit intense, but they were great. Got those done early on. I found it a little bit difficult the first year of grad school to kind of know how much research I should be doing and how much classwork I should be doing. And that's something that you can always talk to your advisors about, because it sometimes varies depending on your lab and where the priorities are. So everyone's experience will be unique, but just I encourage you to talk to people about that part of it.
Yeah, I would echo what Anna and Christine have said. And, I think in terms of the structure of the program, there's actually, for our graduate program, if you're in the non-clinical program, there's not a tremendous amount of coursework. You get your stats right out the door, so that because we want to make sure that you have your quantitative training. There's a few other courses that you'll take, but generally people wrap up their courses, and maybe you might take something down the road that is of interest to you because it's something that you've come across because of your research. And so you have the flexibility to take more if you want, but a lot of your time is making that transition from being kind of in a syllabus driven course to being a really independent contributor to the intellectual thinking of the course or of your research. So that's kind of reflected in the way the courses are structured as well.
Great. And I think Christine brought up a really good point about the balance between research and coursework. Our program, as the programs that you're going to be applying to, are heavily research oriented. Would you all talk just a little bit about what is research and what does it look like at the graduate level? I know many of you might be already starting to work in labs and seeing it, but it is very different when you get to that graduate level. So could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I feel like we got an order set, but I'd love to respond to this. So like when you're an undergrad and you're doing research, you are typically like doing some coding, or you're like doing paperwork, or, small things to help along with the research process. And so what kind of surprised me as taking on the role of the person who's kind of in charge of setting this task up is it's a lot of administrative work. It's a lot of setting things up, a lot of planning. So if you have those skills, like really just like keep building on them, and then coming up with research questions, that's usually what freaks people out the most. They're like, how do I come up with the science? And this is where in the first couple of years of your PhD, you're really working closely with your advisor. Sometimes you come in with some general ideas of like, okay, this is what I'd like to work towards. And that's what's good. It's good to be flexible in like what you would like to approach as part of your research career as part of your PhD. But really, you're going to be working with your advisor, maybe picking up on some projects that they have ongoing or that they'd like to complete. And then as you get towards your third, fourth, fifth year, that's when you start doing your own independent research, where you're really kind of driving the questions, the design, and the methods. But really, it's a collaborative experience. And it really just is an open conversation between you and your advisor. And a lot of it is a mentorship. So you usually have undergrads working with you, or maybe master's students. So really taking the time to build those skills on communication and goal setting, and just being honest with yourself about like, I need to learn. You don't have to come in to be an expert, you're coming to become an expert. And so letting go of some of those preconceptions and just being comfortable in that space of like, how do I figure this out? I think is the most helpful way to approach research, in my opinion.
I'll stick with the order too. I kind of like it, guys. We have a system. So I completely agree with Anna. I think there is this kind of just, it tends to be kind of a natural progression towards more independence with the support of your advisor and your committee and so forth. It was a big change. I did research as an undergraduate, and I was basically kind of assigned tasks, and I completed those tasks. It was fun. I went to lab meetings and talked about it. And then when I transitioned into my PhD program, there was a little bit of pressure. Now I come up with my own questions, and oh gosh, this is challenging. Am I asking the right questions? But I really encourage you guys to like embrace that part of the experience, because it ends up being the coolest part, because you're obviously in a lab where they're doing work that you're interested in. Your advisor is there to help support you. And as Anna said, a lot of the times when you join the lab, you're going to be joining different projects, or, a project that's already set up, or working with your advisor to develop a project. And so you're going to be given that support to kind of develop those questions of interest. Like Anna, I suggest ask questions. I remember being really intimidated when someone would say a term I didn't know, or an area of research that I wasn't familiar with. And instead of sometimes asking like, oh, well, can you recommend some fundamental papers or some seminal papers on that topic? I'm not as familiar and I want to learn. Sometimes I would then kind of write a note and then Google frantically, am I reading the right paper? And everyone expects you to be developing and to be learning, and they'll only be happy if you ask questions. And so I did find that the first few years of grad school were a little bit, I was assigned a project when I first joined my lab. That's not always the case. So it really depends on the lab that you're joining. I know that other individuals in my cohort, they kind of worked with their advisor to kind of come up with a first year project. And that was a little bit daunting for them. Others really enjoyed that process. So I think just speaking openly, what's expected, what are my goals for my first year of research? What should I be trying to get done in this first year? That helped alleviate some of my anxiety about what was expected. And then I could just kind of enjoy the process. Also, you're going to be, as Anna mentioned, mentoring research assistants. You're going to be helping with, depending on your lab, perhaps some of the IRB stuff. So you're learning a little bit more about research on the different levels. So some days you might be, creating your own packets to run a subject. And then other days you're really just doing some in-depth reading and really learning. And it's fun. So embrace the experience. It could be a little bit daunting, but there are people there to help you along the way. And I just encourage you to make the most of that, because that's when the really cool stuff happens.
I think what I would add, and obviously reinforce from Christine and Anna, it's good to think about, where you end up at the end of this, right? So you're going to have to defend the work that you've done, create kind of a body of work, and talk about it to a committee of professors and be the expert in the room, as it were. So you'll need to say why you chose the methods you did, and why they're the best approach, or maybe why they're not the best approach, and be able to criticize your own work and think about the strengths and weaknesses of it and where you would go with it. And so that takes a lot of knowledge of the literature, knowledge of methods, knowledge of a lot of different maybe avenues that you tried and didn't work out. So and obviously you don't have to be there when you first start. And I think having that conversation with your research advisor, your mentor, about how they think about the research progression is so important. And it really does vary so much by the various different areas in psychology. Some areas, you really do a lot of small pilot studies starting up, and you build up because you really need to get the methods worked out before you ask your big question or series of questions later on. And so, but other times you might, especially if you're doing human subjects work where, with a very a vulnerable population or a clinical population, you might not be able to just go around doing pilot studies for several years before you try. You really just have to plan and plan and plan. So what things look like is slightly different by area, but again, having that discussion with your advisor and thinking about, what the goals are. But generally, there is that nice transition where you come in, you've got a little bit of structure because you've got your courseworks, you're going to lab meetings, you're meeting with your advisor and talking about ideas. And then as you go, you become kind of the mentor of a bunch of graduate students or undergraduate students who are working with you to collect data. So it's kind of a nice transition.
I would add one other little thing. I think what Frances said is so important because it does vary so much, and thinking about that trajectory is huge, because it goes by quicker than you would think. And you thinking about where you want to end up, I completely agree with you, Francis. The other little, like, this is just a suggestion. I have always had just kind of on my computer somewhere like a research kind of journal or notes where I like jot down ideas and different things along the way. And I found that it's just been really valuable because in kind of tracking my own research process and ideas, you might forget about things. And so I started it probably halfway through my grad program, but I think it's been really helpful and it's something that I've continued on. So just a little suggestion of something that might help along the way once you guys get started.
That's a great tip. I really like that. One of the questions that came in advance was wondering how the grad experience changes from year to year. Would you all just talk a little bit about that, what that has looked like in your experience? I know, Anna, you're going into your second year, so you could maybe talk a little bit about what it's like to have survived the first year and still are willing to come back for a second.
Yeah. I think it's about building like a slow confidence. You come in and you're really terrified and you're like, oh my God, they're going to figure out I'm not smart enough to be here. And then hopefully slowly people start encouraging you, you prove yourself wrong, and you keep coming back because you're like, I really want to do this. I like mentoring. I like teaching. I like research. You don't have to like all of those things, but pieces and aspects of them are really important if you want to be an academic or a researcher. And yeah, I did my master's before coming here. And so, been in grad school for a while, but yeah, just, I guess coming back the second year, it's like, okay, I've done a year of kind of like gathering my foundation. I've started addressing some research questions. And now it's like, well, how do I set up my second year and, reach certain milestones that when I get to my third year, I can start reaching new milestones. It's really just about planning and being realistic with yourself and just building a really good relationship with your advisor and your team to make sure that you feel supported and that you feel like you have the tools to succeed for the next couple years. Yeah.
Kimberly, would it be best? I have my own experiences, but I know that I was in a different program. So is this specific to the UT Austin program, or should I just speak generally about?
No, I think it would be very helpful for them to know, what your experience was like, because we know not everyone will be applying to UT. They're looking at a wide range of programs. So we'd love to hear your experience at a different program. I think that's really valuable.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kimberly. So I second what Anna said. It is this progression. It's really an interesting experience, and it does vary very much depending on what program you're in and what school you're attending. But generally speaking, every program will have a list of requirements and things that you need to kind of go through throughout your progression and different kind of, like for me, I had my first 2 years, I had a first year project that was due where I didn't need to submit for publication, but the goal was at the end of the 2 years, you would have something like project that was finished and you'd kind of have a write-up of that entire project, just to give you a goal of something to kind of work through. And also something to put on your CV, something tangible to show what you've done. And then in our third year, we had a written test, which was probably the most challenging test of my my graduate program, but it was also one of the coolest experiences because it was basically comprised of putting together a reading list with your committee of, I think I had 120 articles and chapters that were all geared towards the area of research that I was pursuing and to really help me develop as a researcher and to know more about my area of research. And then my committee members, the written test for my program, it very much differs, put together questions and it was kind of an essay test where I was asked to really delve into the topic and address these questions. And it was meant to be not a anxiety producing experience, although it was, I'll be honest, but it was also meant just to be like a really helpful experience in terms of growing as a researcher and really knowing your stuff. And everyone was very supportive. And then, as you progress, depending on what program you are, usually you have your dissertation, you're dissertating in your last year or two, where you have your dissertation, you put together, a set of studies that are really geared towards your independence, you're growing your independence in your specific research interests. and you're writing up those studies, and it's a lot of writing, and it's a lot of kind of analyzing and really getting into it. So depending on the program, and a lot of these programs you can actually look up, to see the requirements or kind of the structure of the program. A lot of them will have some sort of kind of general guidelines to kind of show you through that, but generally speaking, it's different than undergrad in that you don't get, you're not getting evaluated every semester. You don't have take-home tests, but there are these it is structured in a way to ensure that you're continuing to grow and continuing to advance as a research, and to kind of give you these more kind of little milestones that you're going to hit along the way. And that very much did guide my graduate experience. The first 2 years, it was really learning, taking those classes, beginning to do more research. And then, like I said, it's delving more into the research, really reading and starting to write up some of my projects, starting to try to get publications out, because that's going to be huge. If you're looking for a postdoc, you want to be able to show something on your CV that you've produced, whether it be, just getting a poster out in the first year, or working towards getting a manuscript out. And then later on, again, working on your dissertation and defending that. And so it sounds daunting, but it really, once you're in it, hindsight, it is daunting, but it's also a really cool experience, because you're doing it because you really like research, and you're doing it with a cohort and individuals who are there to support you.
Yeah, I think in your first year, so many things are changing. Perhaps you've moved somewhere new, you've met all these new people, you're adapting to wherever you've moved, you're trying to figure out how to order things and how to do all the bureaucracy of the new school. And so it just whips by, and it's kind of chaotic. I think it's not atypical for students to feel a little bit of a slump in year 2, because they're coming off this ride of like moving to this new place and doing all these courses, and all of a sudden they're like, where am I? But then people tend to get their feet and their balance back. And what's also nice in those upper years, you've probably done some studies, some pilot data. Maybe you presented them at a meeting, and when you present at scientific meetings, you get to meet other people who are also really interested in the same things you are, and it helps you build this whole network of people that are fun to email and share your stresses and worries and ideas with. And so that's another, I think, big element of the transition across the years, is you build your own network of people, either outside of your university or even other collaborators at your university. And that helps, because these are people that are really into whatever you're interested in as well, and can help you develop it. So I'd say that's one thing. As you get that confidence and you reach out to people, it's really nice, because it really bolsters your ability to do work and find your feet.
Great. I want to just also get to funding, and then we'll take questions. So if you could all maybe just talk a little bit about what is funding in graduate school. Is that even a thing? What does it look like?
Yeah, I can give a quick explanation of like funding. So this is something that's incredibly nerve-wracking. I come from like a pretty low SES background. And so for me, I was like, can I do a PhD? Can I afford it? And really, the university does do their best. UT has one of the best funding packages out there. In general, for PhDs across the board, you never want to accept a PhD that doesn't at least pay your tuition, and as well offer a stipend. So stipend is like a salary. You'll either be a teaching assistant or a graduate research assistant. And so you'll get paid for a 20-ish hour position, and that's your salary for the year. The program will also pay your tuition, and if you're lucky and you get into UT, they will also pay your health insurance, which is a huge blessing. And it's still stressful. You're still dealing with financial aid, which can be a headache sometimes. But if you have someone like Kimberly on your side who can fight for you and advocate for you, then it goes far better, more smoothly. But yeah, the reality is, like, a lot of times you will still take out loans to supplement your income. That's something I do. If you are in a position to like have support from your parents or a caregiver. As someone asked how much average additional aid is needed, I'll be totally transparent. I usually take out between like 5,000 and 10,000 in loans. And that's just because I have an expensive mountain biking habit. But it's really like people can make their budget work for them. Usually the stipend is around $24,000 a year. Austin's a little expensive. And so I probably could live just off that stipend. I know some students do, but again, I have an expensive mountain biking habit. So you really can make it work for yourself. And when you think of like loans, if you're able to take them out as a graduate student, it really is an investment in yourself. At least that's what I'm telling me to feel better about that growing loan balance. But it's definitely possible. It's definitely easy to do. And the department, especially at UT, is very supportive and understanding about students' financial insecurities.
I don't have much to add. I think Anna did a great job. I know that for some of my friends, summer funding has been an issue in different programs. So that's always something to think about and ask, you know, if you're thinking between two offers, that, you know, it's okay to ask about the funding situation. That should be pretty transparent in your offer. And sometimes there are slight differences between research assistantships versus TAs. They usually pay the same. But it is also nice if you have, this is a little bit outside of the funding, if you have, it's nice not to have to TA every semester. So if you are joining a lab that has more funding, you might be more likely to get a research assistantship, which is just going to give you a little bit more time to focus on your research, not to have to TA. So those are just two additional things, but overall, you can make it work.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. I had, like Anna, I had to take out loans when I was a graduate student, and I paid them back once I had a job, and all was well. But the stipend that we currently offer, so the minimum that you can be compensated in a year is $24,000 a year, and we're going to raise that to $28,000 in about a year and a half. So reflecting the fact that Austin is getting more expensive, and so we want people to be able to not have to take additional jobs out, because it really is does make it difficult for you to get everything you need to be done for your research and your coursework. I'd say, you know, there's kind of a lot of different ways in which the funding works during your time in our program, and it's probably true of other programs as well. If you're a teaching assistant in the summer, then you get your stipend from being the teaching assistant. And so you're doing that, but you're also doing your research. So you're kind of trying to balance that. So it's like having another job. You might be appointed as a graduate research assistant, which means that your research mentor has funds that they can pay so that you get your stipend, and you don't have to be a teaching assistant. You can just focus on your research. And then, you know, it's always nice to get a fellowship as well, in which case you don't have to TA, but you're still working on your research. So we now have a minimum of 24,000. It's not always optimally distributed in the year. We know, you know, when you're in a graduate program, you really are supposed to be working throughout the year, summers included. So we want to make sure it's distributed so that you can pay your bills, because bills come every month, regardless of whether your salary does. And so we try to work on getting that distribution a little bit better, but at least you know you can budget based on the stipend. And I think the students maybe later on have a nice breakdown of how that budgeting can work.
Great. Any questions from the audience? Feel free to chat or unmute yourself and ask.
So there are two questions that came in the chat, if you can. So one question was, can you have an additional job during grad school? And the other one was, how do stipends exactly work? Is it like the federal work study program?
Might be easiest for Francis to answer.
Yeah, sure.
Standpoint.
So you can take a job, an additional job. You obviously, and some of the students do, you know, to supplement their expensive athletic activities or whatever they're doing with their bikes. You know, we're hoping that the increase in the stipend will limit the need to do that, because again, we don't want you to have to be in the program for more years than are needed, because you haven't been able to get your work done. And it's very stressful trying to manage a job and stuff. But there's nothing stopping you from having some sort of part-time employment outside of your whatever employment you have at UT, because technically we're only appointing you for 20 hours a week, but that's a logistical thing you don't need to worry about. The second question, I forget what the second question was.
It was, how do stipends work?
Oh,
in
stipend.
terms of, yeah.
And on that, do you pay taxes on stipend?
You do, yes, but luckily it's so low. You don't have to pay a lot of taxes when you're making that little money in a year. So, it is like a monthly salary. You get a monthly payment into your account. The tuition is covered by a separate pool of money. So you're going to get generally a monthly payment, like a salary. And we guarantee the funding throughout your time in the program. If your time in the program is becoming a little too long, then we have to justify to the graduate school. But generally you can anticipate, and this will be in your offer letter, that what you will make each year and how that will be distributed over the summer, fall, and spring semesters.
I just want to address some of I know we have to move on to the next panel, but there's a couple questions. So I will actually be moderating a panel at 11:15 that answers some of these questions in the chat about like master's programs, other program applications. So please stick around for that. And again, like how many do you study for class? We'll talk a little bit more about that in either the next panel or the one I'm moderating later. And yeah, if you come to UT and you're interested in taxes, I love paperwork. I would love to talk to you about taxes. So please find my email and we can talk about paperwork together. It's a fun journey. But yeah.
Great. I think we have to move on to our next panel. I want to keep us on time. I know there's more questions coming in, so we will, if those don't get answered in the upcoming panels, feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions, and then I can also put you in touch with graduate students if you want a graduate student perspective on something.